Hello, and thank you for tuning in to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jake Daly. Today is Wednesday, April 9th. We've got a good show for you today. We are going to discuss some of the house settlement. It's looking to get finalized right now, looking a little closer to the end goal. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to touch on some Northwestern football. They recently came out that they're settling some of their hazing allegations lawsuits from 2022-2023 under Pat Fitzgerald. Going to talk a little bit about that. We're also going to get into some Coach of the Year candidates as well as potential teams that may join the pack in this next round of conference realignment. Make sure you stick around for our final segment where we're going to talk a little bit more about Deion Sanders in Colorado and his comments that his guys, Travis Hunter, Shedeur Sanders, are the surest bets in this year's draft. But before we get into all of that, I'd just like to remind everyone to like and subscribe, as well as please tip donate. We appreciate every bit of your support. If you've got a question during the show, we want to hear it. If you've got a comment, just a thought, anything like that, don't hesitate to drop it in the chat. Now, if you want to make absolutely sure that your message stands out, gets featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that. Use the super chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your super chat. This guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also just a fantastic way to support our channel. We rely on your support to keep bringing you every bit of the sports content that you love, and we appreciate all of it. So go ahead, let us know what you're thinking. Hit that super chat button, and let's just keep this show as interactive and as fun, as exciting as possible. And if you prefer, you can also go to gsmcsport.net to tip, donate, and leave a comment or question there. We couldn't do what we do without your amazing support. We are so glad to have you as a part of our community. All right, let's talk a little bit about this house settlement. So obviously, this has been one of the big news stories throughout the college football, throughout the college athletics world. In the past year or so, this has really been picking up steam. So federal judge, U.S. District Court Judge Claudia Wilken, she just heard objections on Monday, final objections. She was able to make a final ruling. That was an option. It was kind of expected that that was not going to happen on Monday, and it did not. So she heard some objections, and she did have her own comments, suggestions, a couple things that she brought up that she thought could maybe be tweaked or amended between these two sides. Mind you, this is a $2.8 billion case lawsuit. It's a combination of a couple different lawsuits against the NCAA. So this is big time. And if approved, this settlement would allow schools to begin paying athletes directly as soon as July 1st. So this is going to be really impacting even the spring transfer portal, guys that are going to transfer later on this year. This is going to be something that's going to affect them. So one of the big things, obviously, is basically the salary cap. So, in essence, schools are only going to be able to pay their athletes up to $20.5 million this season, this year. That's going to have to be spread across all of their athletics. And it's kind of up to schools' discretion what they want to spend it on. If they want to spend it on football, basketball, Olympic sports, female sports, anything, that's each school's prerogative. That's their decision. So it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, you'll probably see more of the basketball powerhouses, blue bloods like Duke, North Carolina. Well, North Carolina could be an interesting one. But Duke, some of those guys like that, Kansas, they're probably going to lean more into men's basketball. Obviously, probably some of the SEC schools are going to go heavy into football. But basically, it's going to be a salary cap. That's going to be their limit, $20.5 million. This is going to be a 10-year agreement between the NCAA and the power conferences. So 10 years, and over the course of that deal, each year it's expected that this salary cap, I'm going to call it a salary cap. It's not technically, but in essence it is. I'm going to call it that. And basically, that number is going to rise every single year of that 10-year deal. So it's going to start at $20.5 million. It's just going to keep going up from there. So some of the objections that Claudia Wilken had brought up in her kind of arguments, I guess, I don't know the legal term, but so there's a few things that she brought up. She did ultimately express optimism for the deal to go through, but her most pressing questions were really about roster size limits. There's about future college athletes kind of being bound by settlement, and as well as just the issues of third-party donations, third-party agreements, kind of NIL collective-based stuff like that. So the way this is going to work now is each team can allocate full or partial scholarships for as many or as few athletes as it wants within the allotted number of roster spots. So it's not going to be how football was, these past, I don't know how long, but it used to be you had 85 scholarship players, and then after that, you can have however many walk-ons you want. Most teams would tend to have between 110 and 120 guys on their football roster, but obviously only 85 scholarships. That's not going to be the case anymore. So there's going to be no scholarship limit. It's going to be a hard roster limit. So for football, this hard roster limit is going to be 105 players. And like I said, most programs, even though they only have 85 scholarship guys, the vast majority of football programs probably have around 120 guys, just with walk-ons, preferred walk-ons, and these are the guys that are going to get cut. I know I just saw Rich Rodriguez at West Virginia going back there. He just cut 22 guys, and that included a couple freshmen, a couple transfer senior guys that had tried to come in and make it at West Virginia, and these kids had to get cut because this is a hard roster limit, and even though the settlement has not passed, he's prepping for it, and he also mentioned that they want some more guys in the portal, so they're probably going to have to cut another 5 to 10 guys, and this is going to be the reality for the vast majority of football as well as other athletic sports. And that was one of Claudia Wilken's main kind of contentious points. She was kind of questioning it, was that a lot of sports are going to they're going to threaten roster spots. These athletes are going to get cut because, especially when you think about some of the Olympic sports, some of the smaller sports, a lot of those kids are going to be walk-ons, preferred walk-ons. They might not have an actual full scholarship. And so with this roster limit compared to a scholarship limit, it's going to cut a lot of these kids' places in this sport. And so we're talking maybe a couple thousand athletes across the country that are in jeopardy of having their spot taken, or their spot just taken away purely because of this roster limit size. I know someone personally who had their roster spot taken away from swimming at Washington State because of this incoming settlement. There were a couple athletes that spoke in these final arguments on Monday, basically saying that. There was a swimmer, a freshman, I don't remember from what school I know, but he had said that the coaches already told him, hey, we're not going to have a spot for you, unfortunately, because we have to prepare for this. So Wilkins, she kind of brought up that the idea that maybe those athletes that are already in college could be grandfathered into this rule. I really like that. I think it makes a lot of sense. The only thing that I'm kind of wondering is how that affects, I guess, incoming classes. When would it balance out, essentially? That's what I think, because that would probably be 3 or 4 years down the line, and it'd probably be tough to balance out. So that's the only thing that I could see being an issue with kind of trying to grandfather these athletes in. But I do feel for the kids. I think it's a tough situation to be in, especially if you're one of those athletes. But on the flip side, there's going to be a lot of athletes that do benefit from this, especially in the world of college football. There's going to be a lot of guys that are going to be able to make some money from here. And it's not just going to be your top high-level guys. The other big piece of this was revenue sharing. And the figure that I saw, which I was kind of surprised by, was that revenue sharing could almost be 50-50 between athletic programs and athletes. And personally, I think that's kind of crazy. I don't know if crazy is the right word. I think it's really interesting. I'm an advocate for athletes to be paid. I think that's a good thing at this point in the junction of where the NCAA is. It makes a lot of sense. They're basically professional athletes. And it makes sense that they should get some of the money that they basically generate for these schools. However, taking half of that money, that's a really big number. That's also, look at how much goes into running an athletic program, just running an athletic office, having so many different varsity sports that you have to take care of. And if you're giving half of that money away, that's going to be a big chunk, and it's going to affect what a lot of these schools can do. Between travel, between paying athletes, between just having facilities for them, having the best equipment, the best coaching staffs, because all of that is from the athletics money that's generated by these athletes. Obviously, I do think that they should get a certain percentage of it. I think that that's definitely something they're entitled to. That should be a part of what they're doing. But the idea that they should earn half of what this revenue is that's a lot of money. I think probably a 70-30 split, maybe even 60-40, that makes more sense. They're still getting a substantial chunk of change. They're still generating a lot of this money. They're still getting a really good percentage, a good portion of this, especially when you look at some of the figures that some of these athletic offices just generate in general. It's a staggering number for some of these really big time schools, and if you're gonna give your athletes half that money, that's really gonna affect what these programs can do. It's gonna be interesting to see. I think if that's the actual number, if it is truly 50-50, you're gonna see programs making cuts. You're gonna see teams saying, hey, we can't build this new facility. At Ole Miss, they just built the Manning Center 2 or 3 years ago. That was a nine-figure athletic facility purely for football. Now think about if your athletes are taking half of your revenue, are you going to be able to build that kind of facility? Are you going to be able to do something like that for your athletes? I think that's going to be the big thing here is, are these athletes, obviously they're benefiting from revenue share, but if they're getting, some of their things that they take for granted, some of their facilities, some of their coaching staff, just the training staff, nutrition, if some of that stuff starts to get cut, does the revenue outweigh that? I think that's going to be something to really look at here, and we're going to see. But it sounds like this is going to be approved in the next few weeks. This house settlement will happen. College athletes will get paid. So now we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we're going to talk a little Northwestern football, touch on their former head coach, Pat Fitzgerald. But first, we're going to take a short break. We'll see you shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.